Delicate Subject. Chapter 5. Return to ship life was hard. Really hard. Extra hard. Unfortunately, she had potentially unpleasant news to break to both of them. Her vision of their futures, as individuals and together, was overwhelming her sense of personal boundaries, and she was gonna go with it. Normally, Thane's health decisions would be his choice, but fuck that. She'd also thought about what Thane had said about her seeing Garrus's place within the hierarchy, and as a result, her mind had gone to an unusual place. So Thane was going to be spending a great deal of time in the medbay, and Garrus was going to approach his father on behalf of the crew of the Normandy. She was trying to think ahead, and she knew there was very little future as part of Cerberus. They had discussed this off the ship in noisy places to make sure they were not overheard. They knew she intended to survive, to keep the ship. She hadn't elaborated further, just set the framework for understanding of future conversations on board the Normandy, assuming they were under surveillance. She'd stolen the Normandy once and handed it back, and the Alliance hadn't behaved well, all things considered. Now she was a pirate, and she was enjoying that autonomy. She would like the Alliance's cooperation, but she didn't want to take orders from Hackett. Competition for their expertise would be key if they survived. Conversations with Thane and Garrus had blurred her hard-line distinction between now and the future, and she'd thought about it. She wanted to survive, and if they came back from the collector ship, she wanted a safe berth. She didn't think it was Earth. She didn't think it was Palaven, but the Normandy could be a hell of an ally. She could arrange to be attractive to both factions. Thane had sparked something with the phrase independent contractor and discussions of rank. If she worked cooperatively with different council races, she could continue with her crew and autonomy, stay mobile during the upcoming fight with the Reapers. It did hinge on Garrus being able to broker some level of cooperation with the Taurians, set Palaven as a haven. She would try to set Earth as a haven with her as a Spectre, separate from Alliance command. People asked her for favors all the time. Might as well get more mileage from it. She was going to leverage her access to technology, competence, and experience for all it was worth. If they lived. Everyone was going to be needing help from competent people soon. She thought about springing her plans on both of them together. Thane would back her up with Garrus, and Garrus would back her up with Thane. But they deserved better than an ambush. It would be fun, though. No, she had standards of polite behavior. Maybe they'd both be assholes about it and she could escalate. She smiled and headed to the battery. After kissing Garrus hello 3 times, she told him, "I have an idea. I need help with it." Garrus leaned against the console. "Okay, tell me." "I'm trying to think ahead to what happens after going through the relay. I know everyone's only looking so far ahead. I'm planning to survive, and we need a game plan for when we finish the mission. I don't want to return to the Alliance because I am enjoying being in charge." Garrus smiled at that. She gave him a smirk and continued. "What do you think about maintaining independent contractor rank-free status and communicating with the Palaven hierarchy regarding cooperation with the Normandy crew? Ultimately, I'm after autonomy, funding, and access to intel. I could do it as a Spectre. If we coordinate with the hierarchy and also the Alliance, and they both know they need our help, we could do it. I'm thinking of asking the R to set us up with some Taurians in distress. I'm sure they exist. If we rescue a few people before we go, we'd have a little good faith when we got back. Add that to the tech in the Normandy herself, intel about the collectors, and we might be able to do it. We wouldn't be pirates, we'd be privateers. This is plan A. We manage 2 home ports. If we can't manage that, we can probably support ourselves through mining, but I'd rather not spend all my time doing that. I know it's asking you to return to something that you've as much as admitted you've abandoned, but I'm not asking you to travel to Palaven with me. You'd be the representative from the Normandy to the hierarchy, and I'd stay on video conference, out of nose range. He looked stunned. Shepard, we just got back from shore leave. Is this what your brain did with your time off? She smiled at him. Between getting my hair braided and other things? Yeah, she's active. His smile was appreciative, but he was not ready to speak yet. She said, The council said we would be fine if we stayed in Terminus, but I'm thinking maybe if you spoke to your father. Garrus took a deep breath and dropped his head forward, and she said, I am sorry if it seemed I was avoiding the future. I'm not. We can have it all, Garrus. If we're careful, if we do this right, we can survive this and show other people how it's done. We can live a long time, and I can be there with you every step. Just because I'm careful to make sure you have options open does not mean I don't have hopes about you taking the option to stay with me. He tilted his head up. If I didn't know better, I'd think maybe you were trying to inspire me. She grinned at him. Is it working? Yeah, I think it is. I should talk to my father anyway. I was planning to talk to him before going through the relay. It might make it easier to approach him in a professional capacity. She nodded. Okay, think about it. Let me know what you need. I'm gonna talk to Liara. If there is anybody that you think would do the job better as a Taurian contact, let me know. Maybe we should recruit a liaison to the hierarchy. They wouldn't be stationed on the ship, but we could work this as a sideline. It's a good idea. It won't be fun, but it's for the best cause. I can swallow some pride. You'll still have some pride left, I hope? He shrugged. I seem to just keep making more. I'll give you a heads up on something else. I have to talk to Thane, but he might not like it. He tilted his head in question. I think the Hannah, Thane, or both, are criminally negligent on the subject of Kepral syndrome. I don't think he's gone under a doctor's care, and Karen Shakwas has essentially confirmed that. I've put Solis, Shakwas, and Lawson on coming up with treatments, and I have to break it to Thane that he's going to be benched on away missions until they tell me they've taken all measures necessary to ensure they are doing all they can do. I think he wants a death sentence. Telling any other man he's going to survive might be something they'd thank me for, but in this case... Garrus smiled. So you want me to, what, hold him down so he takes his medicine? She grinned at him. It might just come to that. You're persuasive. Well, thank you for thinking of him. And I think with that team, there's a chance. It's worth taking. He may not thank you, but I will. You know you can always count on me to hold him down when necessary. I'll let you know how it goes. Don't be surprised if it goes from reticent to laconic. She found Thane exercising in the cargo bay. He stopped and smiled as she approached, and she was struck with apprehension. She swatted down complications and implications as he studied her face. She smiled back at him and gestured that they sit, and they did, perched on crates. She told him, "I'm a manipulative person." He smiled, nodding once, wary. "Good. That was the intent." She continued, "That being disclosed, which you already know, I would like to do something without manipulating you, but it is impossible. So instead of manipulation, I'm going to tell you my thought process. I'm apologizing in advance for my nature and my decision. In my ideal world, your will and your health and your body belong to you. Considering I have asked you to die, you've granted me a great deal of power in that regard. There's a quote from an Earth general, Patton. He said, 'No son of a bitch ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor, dumb son of a bitch die for his country.' I intend to be a daughter of a bitch here. You should meet my mother someday. Anyway, you've offered me your life, and I'm going to tell you that I feel responsible for your health as a result. I won't let you think that you are expendable or that I value you for that. On top of that, I'm in love with you. I have extraordinary resources at my disposal. I would like to ask you a few questions, and I should warn you that your answers have very little impact on my decision, but only on yours. As context, Dr. Shakwas has informed me that her attempts to aid with your Kepral syndrome have been met with passive resistance. When was the last time you saw a doctor and took their advice?" Thane's expression was neutral. 7 years since seeing a doctor." She nodded. He didn't bother to answer about taking the advice. It really didn't matter if he lied to her, but she wanted to acknowledge her curiosity and give him a chance to come clean. She told him, "You said yes awfully quickly to a suicide mission. You speak as though you are not only accepting but at peace with the idea of dying. I think Hanar efforts toward a cure are unacceptable. You may have no rank, but on this ship your health is my responsibility, and you have no medical confidentiality. I have asked Morden, Miranda, and Karen to find stopgap measures to halt or reverse the progression of Keprals while working on an ultimate cure. I have contacted Kolyat, and he has agreed to aid me, and he has donated stem cells, marrow, and blood for study and for possible use in transplantation and synthesis. As the commander of this ship, I need you to live. I understand this violates your free will and your medical choice. That is unforgivable. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I could hope for it. I believe that I have asked you about your health in the past, and you have evaded giving me honest answers. Is that correct?" "Yes." She nodded. "All right. I could pretend to give you a choice, but you're intelligent enough to know that if I were willing to bring it up, I'd be willing to push it, and I am not interested in you testing me on this. I am going to ask you to take a position in the medbay as general, pincushion, and test subject. It is not optional. It is not negotiable, and I will spare you the attempt to make it so. I will also not insult you by giving you the option to leave as though you would take it." He sat silently. He began to smile, and it was not grudging or cold, as he said, "I imagine I am repaid for invading your privacy and altering the course of your command." "Not yet, but I'm working on it." He inclined his head. "I am boxed in neatly. My compliments." She smiled. "Don't make me warn Dr. Chakwas to beware seduction." That got a more genuine smile from him. "That will not be necessary. You could always take it out on me in bed." His glance was warm and appraising. "Have you considered that you have a streak of masochism?" Her grin was crooked. "I think it's impossible to make it through military training without developing one. I'd ask if you have considered that you have a sadistic streak, but I know the answer. If you lie or evade treatment, Garrus will come into play." "Very nicely boxed in." "Please, with my greatest hopes and compliments, report to Dr. Chakwas at what should be your earliest convenience. I know you're being given no choice by someone in authority, someone you love, your will subverted, to undergo surgery you don't want, with the promise that it might help your people." She stood and turned to go with a solemn smile, ready to give him space. "Siha, I would regret not saying this once I have recovered from my shock. Thank you." "You're welcome. And I am sorry." "I shall attempt to practice forgiveness, though it is not my way." She tipped her head forward, sorrow flooding her. "I understand." She turned to leave. Before she opened the door, his hands were on her shoulders, and he spun her around and pressed her back against the door with his body. She stared in shock into intent dark eyes as he said, "I would also regret not learning from the last time you left me alone in a room, your assumptions about my mindset unchallenged." His hand wrapped her hair around his wrist and bent her head back. His arm came around her waist, the weight of his body pressing her hard back against the door. He kissed her, hard, hungry, and unyielding. She was so grateful not to be walking out this door alone, facing a burden of forgiveness, that she kissed him back, the notes of surprise and even panic being overwhelmed by venom and force. She'd faced withdrawal, distance from him, and the flood of venom into her blood was embraced with the fallen and helpless fervor of an addict. She realized she had no hope of becoming a full-blown masochist because reverie and tyranny both made it impossible to feel pain clearly, and it was always transformed into pleasure. So he could be as sadistic as he damned well wanted, and it would have almost no impact, as long as they had met a jail. Relative masochism had been a joke, though, for both of them, and she didn't dwell on it. She focused on his mouth and his kiss, his body and arm holding her weight up as she lost her balance and strength. He pulled back and looked at her appraisingly as her eyes felt close to crossing. He seemed satisfied with her inability to focus. "Hear why you must be forgiven, Jane. You said that you were manipulative, and there is no doubt that is true. I applaud that. You have what you want, and that is true. I applaud that as well. But your methods Jane, your methods are what require forgiveness. You know I have not wished to live, but you do not confide in me that the same has happened to you. You know what this would cost, my will and my choice to end my life when I choose to end it. Yet you did not ask in the spirit of the words I use to answer. You knew my answer. But you asked as Shepard, couching your request in command. You know that how I answer is for you, Jane. It may be that I began under your command as Siha and then Shepard, but now you are Jane. I demand that you no longer hide behind command or some future circumstance you believe will take me from you. Give me no further opportunities to leave with equitable composure. Do not give them to Garrus. We are capable men, Jane. We can find the exits on our own if we wish without you pointing them out to us. Ask me, Jane. Ask for what you want. She was panting and rethinking the entire inability for him to be sadistic thing. Resistance to his demand pulled at her like a stone block in a deep cave. She counted on it being unyielding. She suspected Tiamat influenced her far more than he believed, or that she didn't understand herself as well as she thought she did. She started to feel her resistance melt away, and she promised she'd roll it back. She'd close it again. This was just for the moment. Because he asked, because he deserved better, she said. Thane, please stay with me. Please stay alive with me. I need you. His head tilted as though he didn't believe she'd actually said it, searching her face for signs of deception. The breath left him and his eyes closed as he said, always, Jane. For you. And because he was who he was in the moment, he opened his eyes and said with a matching smile to the tone of his words, you needn't ask. Normally she'd laugh, but she saw her tendency toward humor right now as he would see it, as deflection. He intended this barb to hit, for it to strike and stay deep, for it to pump its message in with each beat of her heart. Any move toward disarming it or removing it would be met with intent to strike deeper. It was enough to give her caution, give her insight, see the open and vulnerable passage in herself that he knew was there and could find unerringly. She could see the shorter distance he intended her to travel to him, over ground intended for her only, no longer burdened by the insult of presumed command. An exposed path. He'd already forgiven her, but he had to let her know what in her graceless galloping she'd trampled, what he intended to protect. He looked at her, and he had never seemed more alien since dropping through a ceiling and murdering 4 people before she had thought to blink. She was mesmerized again. He seemed to waver between wanting to kiss her or kill her, and at this point she'd take either. She would welcome them both, and he was not interested in her wishes in the moment unless she was willing to ask for them without hiding. Her tongue was still and her courage wanting. He set her on her feet. You must go, and I must report to the medbay. He opened the door, turned her facing out, pushed her until she crossed over the threshold, and then released his hands and let them drop away, the door closing behind her. She moved away into the restroom behind a closed door, leaned her head against cool metal, and stood there for long minutes, remembering the old adage, a masochist says, hurt me, and a sadist says, no. She took long breaths, waited for venom to very, very slowly leave her system, focusing on the cold and the privacy and the overwhelming stupid that had gushed out of her, seeming like guile. Appreciation in her taste of men built again, and she didn't feel sorry for herself. She should have kissed him right then. More stupid. Well, he learned. She learned. Next time. Of course she'd piss him off, and of course there'd be a next time. She had what she wanted. She had who she wanted. She'd gotten them both to do things they didn't want to do. And now she had to rethink a large part of her personality to avoid what just happened from ever happening again. But first, she had to tell Garrus. Garrus was the cure to all that was ailing her. All she had to do was confess that she'd been spanked like a 4-year-old. She smiled and decided to stop hiding and found her sense of humor again. Garrus was bent over the console in the battery laughing, and she was in good company with him saying, "Wow, need some Metagel after that?" "Won't help. The wound's internal. And a burn." "Can't say I'm sorry he said it, but I'm glad it wasn't me." "I'm not sure I can say sorry much more today." "You didn't say sorry either time. Not really. But I've gotten pretty far by just saying, 'Yes, ma'am.' Now's the time if you need to tell me something uncomfortable. I swear, it couldn't be that bad." He shook his head. "I'm not falling for that." She shrugged. "Well, the invitation is open if it comes up." "You're not a masochist." Yeah, maybe he brings it out in me. Or the comment set the tone for the conversation where Tiamat took me. I don't know. I think Tiamat just makes me open to anything. Reverie seems to have the same effect. Haven't found anything you don't like yet. I'm just lucky, I guess. At least I'm good for the ego. Unless you're Thane. He said with a raised brow plate. Are you kidding? You're great for his ego. You didn't punch him. Yeah, but I didn't kiss him either. Couldn't find my hands or my lips. Mostly felt like I deserved it. Kicking myself that I didn't kiss him. Missed opportunity. Galling. I missed my shot at angry drill sex, and now I'm gonna pine. He laughed along with her, and when the laughter died down and she was counting her lost chances, said, "Was he right? Have you wanted to die?" "Yes. But I did that already, and it didn't take." He continued to watch her, waiting out the joke. She nodded at him. "It's always there. I'm sure it helps me do my job, not being afraid to die. It's just that it sometimes dips into wanting to rest and not wake up. To escape the weight, the burden, the fate that seems to barrel its incessant way toward me, and if I don't do anything, it will crush too many people. If I were dead, I wouldn't know anymore." "Do you remember anything from when you were dead? Were there, I don't know, human spirits? Where, you call them heaven or hell? Nope, nothing. Maybe it's just me. I never believed in them, so maybe I don't qualify for entry. He walked over to her and put his arms around her. Come to me when you need help, Karim. I do. I just did. I need you. He tipped her chin up and looked down at her. Tell you what, you've done enough for the day. Blow the rest off and come watch a terrible Turian vid with me. We can make fun of it together. You can sit on my lap, we can get distracted, see what happens. You have the best ideas ever. He turned her, pushed her toward the door. I'm good like that. Let's go. She brought popcorn for the occasion and a bottle of vodka. It was harder to get drunk these days with all the upgrades, but not sober was still pretty good under these circumstances. She sat on Garrus's lap and she picked on every single inconsistency and plot hole. You know, you can't just use a face mask in space. It's ridiculous. You have apertures. There'd be a mess. Come on, you can't cover the actor's face. That's a handsome guy. He's a dead guy, a deeply in pain and then dead guy with his bits sucked out. Don't say sucked out. Giving me ideas. She threw popcorn at him. Ew! More improbable things happened. He couldn't fire that weapon. Kickback would break his arm. Sloppy stance. Oh, I see. So when it's something you care about, suddenly it's important. He grinned at her. It's supposed to be mindless entertainment. I don't do mindless. I mean, I try. I've got the bottle and everything, but I can't shut my brain down. Miss Dallins combed through her hair. I suppose I can sympathize with that. Sounds like a challenge or an invitation. She smiled and kissed the side of his throat. It's not a challenge. You can manage in about 5 seconds. The mindless part. He sat up straighter as though to look proud, and she thought about saying, I can't do the same for you, can I? And then she tried to learn from today's experiences. You used to be good at this. Right now was enough. Yes was enough. You prided yourself in the Zen-like in the now. You thought you were good at being in love, and now you suck at it. Instead, she smiled and said, Definitely an invitation. She decided to reverse her customary direction, to think less of herself, idealize him less, see him as he wanted to be seen. It mattered. She stroked her fingertips along the injured side of his face, not on, but around, on the chipped and shattered edges, asking him, How are you? I don't ask enough. His brow plate raised. How am I? She smiled at him. Yeah. How are you? How about I stop managing for a minute and listen? His brow plate rose higher, and he put his hand to her forehead. You're sick. It's the only explanation. She removed his hand, kissed his palm, and held it. How are you, Garrus? Humor me, because I suck at this, because I want to know. He paused the vid, tilted his head back and thought for a moment. His smile was sad. Humoring you, I understand. I miss my squad. It pulls at me. Big things, little things. Some of them would like this vid, some of them wouldn't. Some of them would like you, some of them wouldn't. I hear Sensat in my head telling me to get the fuck off this ship and don't be a suicidal idiot. I used to hear you in my head after you died. But you were often encouraging me to be a suicidal idiot. You weren't always there when I got something right, but you were always there when I fucked up, whether it was a shot or a strategy. I could talk to you about things I couldn't discuss with my squad. I shouldn't be here. I should have died on the floor on Omega. Body probably mutilated, left out as a warning. My squad's bodies pulled out of their shrouds and set as the same. You shouldn't be here. You should have burned up in the atmosphere over Altera. I had your voice in my head, and now you're here with your own words. I'd gotten used to knowing what you were going to say. It's all moving so fast and seems so improbable. There's a part of my head always ready to tell me I'm dead already, that the moment I saw you through my scope was the moment a bullet sliced through my brain. Part of me accepts that and is okay with it. You were with me when you were dead. I heard you. You were real. You were solace, and I had 2 years of confiding in you, conferring with you. When my squad died, their voices were gone, but you were right there, saying, "Nice job, Vakarian. You planned that bit well. Watch your 3 o'clock." I was taking no end of shit from you about my inability to read people. I should have known. You knew I should have known. You were real enough. I was never alone in my failures. You always witnessed those. And when I got it right, I felt I'd made you proud. Now you're here, and it seems maybe I'm dead. Maybe I won't question it because here you throw popcorn at me and I can touch you. Maybe I'm not afraid to die because part of me is convinced I already am. What's happening right now seems impossible. Here you are, alive, a leader with 10 people following you, and here I am, a chance to save the galaxy, not just clean up Omega. It seems prophetic, with you as the bullet to the brain prophet. Me with a tailored fantasy of being able to touch the woman I love, finding more love improbably in a Drell. Part of me is not looking all that close. Maybe it all ties into my last moments of Omega. Afterlife. Shepard. Keeping the squad alive. Seems I couldn't have a better setup to redeem myself, act out my fantasies. The only thing that makes me think I'm alive, really alive, is that your voice is your own. I didn't imagine you. I'm not that creative. She was smiling, beaming, really. Might mean you're dead and I'm really there with you. Are you in my afterlife or am I in yours? Hard to tell. Seems I have the same impossibilities. I have my ship back. I have the one person in the crew I trusted the most, and he inexplicably... Sorry. Old habit. I guess I'm not broken of selling myself short yet. He wants me. Bullshit and all. I've got my crew. I've got my mission, and I... Mind if I borrow your fantasy? Seems I won't be needing to look forward to being dead if I'm already there. His smile was lopsided and wistful. It isn't heaven. She shook her head slowly. It isn't heaven. There'd be no reapers. My squad would be alive. She said it the first time she'd uttered his name to another person. Urim would be alive. My mother would not be dying from Corpalis syndrome. Tell me about her. She rested back against him, enjoying the rise and fall of his chest, his voice vibrating through his plates, and being able to ask such a question in the first place. Turian families are pretty rowdy. Often we grow up and live in clan communal housing. My mother had grown up in the main center of Vakarian life, their madlis in Cyprutine. A madlis is the spiritual home of a clan. Huge. When my dad married her, he took her name and became a Vakarian, and he had his own opinions about what family and service were, and she wanted to keep on going the rowdy route. New status tradition was to have a separate home from the madlis, and he built one, and she went there once, said it was nice, and went back to where her spirit lived. I grew up in the madlis, and I saw how much she loved it, and I loved it myself. She was always at home in the chaos, welcoming more. My dad never felt comfortable there because he knew he wasn't in control. No tolerance for life happening outside his expectations. He was terrible with us as kids. Really, really terrible. Formal and distant and expectant, and Solana and I... Well, Saul was better at being dutiful, but I took after my mom. I was glad I wasn't raised alone in a house with just them. My father's tyranny would have tried to take over, and my mother likely would have been forced to kill him. They love each other. It's a good bond, but being perfect for each other didn't mean they were aligned on the lives they wanted to live, the lives they wanted their children to have. I grew up with a huge extended family who helped me, encouraged me, and his occasional visits home from CSEC, where he tried to teach me his way of doing things, eventually went largely ignored. He always looked so bright and shiny on the vid screen, but in person he was, I don't know, expectation and disappointment. He influenced me, sure, and I tried to make him happy, but I just had too many approving voices in my head. That's what she gave me. Too many approving voices. Too much family. She loves him. I love him. We just don't want to be him. I went away to military service, and I missed her, but I knew she'd always be there. She always was. When I got home, when there was leave, making my favorite foods, asking me if I was in love yet, but never pushing like my father would. Him always asking me if I was ready to be an adult. I know she won't always be there now. She's hardly there at all now. Her mind has been devoured. And when I look at Thane, I think of that process, so slow and so impossible to reverse, taking life and love and competence away breath by breath. Who is Urim? She was actually okay with telling him. And not just as a trade, but because she wanted to tell him. Adrel. I met him on the Citadel. Remember all those times I left a bar early with nobody and didn't go back to the Normandy? I was with him. Absolutely in love with this gentle, smart, funny, and talented man. We met 2 years before the attack on the Citadel, at a military reception, some function I was expected to attend. I was famous at that point, and he went out of his way to introduce himself to me. He was a therapist. A bit like the Asari consort, but with less telepathy, less sex. Drell seemed to be, in my experience, empathetic, and he was an amazing example of that. I can't tell you that he wasn't straight up psychic. I don't know if he'd been watching, but by the time he started to talk to me, he must have seen that I was sick of the place, and he started telling me stories. He kept pretending to not know or forget my name, asking me to say it again, spell it, and telling me spelling in English won't help him at all. He's sorry. Could I put it on his Omnitool so he could study it and try to remember later? I was charmed and relieved of all the military pressure and expectation in his presence. After we left together, he still couldn't remember what my name was over dinner and drinks. He said he'd only remember if I kissed him, and I did. I spent every minute that I could with him, and he never treated me like Shepard. He never did use my last name, said he'd mangle it if he tried to pronounce it. He never asked about work. He told me stories and called me Freyan. When I asked him what it meant, he'd tell me something different each time. That I was the breeze off the dunes, or that piece of fruit on a tree that would not fall down no matter how hard a drill shook the trunk. Anything else to make me smile or laugh? I tried to look it up, and it doesn't exist as a word in Drell, so it was all him. He died when Sovereign attacked the Citadel. His arms looped around her, and she curled into his lap. One arm slipped around his waist, one hand against the rise and fall of his chest. She said, "So, not heaven, but we can act out our fantasies, you were saying?" Act out my fantasies. You're just visiting. Can I stay? I'd like to see what your fantasies are. His arms tightened around her, and then he relaxed. A deep exhale released. You can stay. This would be one of them. She smiled and nuzzled the side of his throat, settling back in with her head on his chest. You are so smooth, Vakarian. And it only took me 3 years. I was dead for 2 of them. Doesn't count. His hand moved through her hair. They count. Thane was benched for testing. Karen confined him to the med bay upon being given full reign and his exceeding control. Jane went to go visit in the morning, not even begging Garrus to come with her. She was sure Garrus had probably checked in 4 times by now. Thane appeared to be meditating, reclined, but she knew he was awake. He had a deeper hum when he slept. Not a snore, a hum. She missed it. When she approached, his eyes opened, and he gifted her with a smile. A hell of a smile. When she got closer, he took her hand and brought it to his lips, held it in his, saying, "Tia, I hope I am forgiven." There's nothing to forgive. I hope I can be forgiven for my shocking lack of intelligence. He squeezed her hand. There is nothing to forgive. I believe I have a temper. It was such a bland understatement. I believe I have one of those myself. I miss you. His smile faded somewhat as he said, Dr. Chakwas has promised to release me from constant confinement if I... What was the word, Karen? Karen didn't look up for her analysis she was buried in, saying, behave. Thane smiled. Yes, that word. I shall attempt it. It looked like he owned the medbay at this point. Once initial monitoring is complete, I should be able to leave more often and only spend part of my time here. When you take over my ship and everyone follows you, try to be kind. Karen laughed and Thane smiled. Do you need anything? Can I bring you anything? Thane shook his head. Garrus has been kind enough to provide me with anything I could need. Stay with me a while longer. She missed his everything. She abandoned the chair at the bedside and climbed onto the bed. He made room for her, and she rested her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders, the hands held on top of his abdomen. His breath that she hoped to extend, set in a rhythm to time.